Hey guys, I'm sure many of you saw the clip on the front page of the Valorant Reddit this past week from my teammate Tens, who was showing off how accurate you can be with the Phantom when full running.
Look at this. I can literally full run with the Phantom and it's pretty accurate.
Now, I actually originally had a video planned talking about some of these mechanics back in the beta, but it ended up falling through, so now is better than ever. This isn't anything new in the game. It's been around since the beginning. I think people just didn't want to believe that it was as good as it was, or they just didn't think that it would work as well as it seemingly does, an attack FPS game made with esports in mind. But now that it's gaining more attention, I want to dive in. While I'm talking and reading through some stuff, I'm gonna have a bunch of different video examples playing, so you guys don't have to stare at, my ugly mug the whole time, but let's go. First, we're gonna take a look at a developer reply on Reddit from April talking about running and walking accuracy. Now, running accuracy. Our intention is that most weapons, shotguns excluded, are not reliable when shooting in a full movement state. If this becomes an effective or a reliable way to shoot the weapons, then we will definitely look to correct it. He then talks about peeker's advantage and networking a little bit, and he says to try to distinguish between someone actually headshotting you in a running state versus it seeming like they were moving when they killed you, but in actuality they're on an accurate state on their client. He also says that they'll continue to watch the movement accuracy, tuning, and feedback, so they're definitely open to changing things. Now he moves on to talking about walking accuracy. Currently, you're able to shoot accurately while walking. It's still more spread and recoil compared to standing still or crouching. Our thought here is that if you're taking the time to move methodically and pre-aim properly, you should be able to shoot a few accurate shots without needing to come to a full stop when walking. Additionally, peaking an angle by walking should not be a high success chance strategy against an opponent holding the angle, as they get a window of time where they'll see you first. Shooting an opponent who is walking will also tag them to a point where they're nearly rooted, and the movement in that case should be fairly irrelevant. So in theory, walk accuracy can be helpful for when you approach an angle and responding quickly if an opponent swings on you. It should not be very helpful to peek with or utilize in combat. This is our current theory with walk shooting, and we'd like to observe over time how the behaviors pan out. The last thing he talks about is some tests that another developer did in response to claims that you could just bind mouse 1 to shoot and walk and be immediately accurate. All these tests were done with the Phantom, and I'll have the results up for you to see while I talk. He says these results aren't going to be perfectly accurate due to inconsistent frame rates, and this is all done with human input, but the gap is large enough that it's safe to say stopping by letting off of movement inputs or counter-strafing is faster than using walk to transition into an accurate state. He says you will also fire your first bullet in the running state during the transition with this bind, so not only is it slower, but you're losing your most accurate bullet when you begin firing as well. As mentioned in the other thread, keep this context in mind when you encounter some of these scenarios. If they're not playing out as intended or you don't agree with the direction, please let us know. This information helps inform us how we should tune the game over time. So basically, the results of the test show that if you were to counter strafe or let go of your movement keys, you would be entering an accurate state 1/100th of a second faster than if you were to just hold shift. And of course, you would retain the first bullet accuracy, of course. Now, the reason I thought that this Reddit reply was relevant, even though it's from April, is because I believe there's only been one patch that adjusted walking accuracy. In May, a little over 2 weeks after that Reddit reply, Riot nerfed walking accuracy and changed all rifles in patch 0.50. They actually buffed rifles overall, but we're just going to look at the most relevant things in regards to accuracy. The patch notes stated, "You will no longer enter the walking accuracy state when transitioning from run to stop. We noticed many players were entering a walking accuracy state during their run to stop transition that made it appear as if shots they fired/landed were done at full speed." They also increased the dead zone accuracy speed threshold from 25 to 30%. Now, you can't gain walk accuracy while transitioning from a run to a stop. We've also slightly increased the size of the dead zone, full accuracy state, to make it a bit easier to get an accurate shot out quickly. And lastly, they lowered the overall base walk accuracy from 0.6 degrees to 0.8 degrees. Not that that game developer speak, I really understand it. We felt like walk spraying with rifles was a little more effective than we'd like, particularly at longer ranges. We're going to pull back on this accuracy slightly and continue to monitor. So after presenting all of that info, where does that leave us? Well, first I want to briefly explain what counter-strafing is, as it directly ties into the next point I'm going to make. We're going to use Counter-Strike as an example. So in CS with an AK, you have a peak velocity of 215 units a second. So you would start at 0 at a stationary position, and as you strafe in a direction, you would build velocity all the way up to 215. What the mechanic of counter strafing is if I'm strafing to the left like this, and I'm building 215, I'm building up to 215 units a second. As I hit D to strafe in the opposite direction, my velocity will drop to 0 before it begins building in the opposite direction. And what counter-strafing is shooting in that window where you hit 0 velocity. So you're taking advantage of the brief transitionary period before you start strafing in the other direction to shoot and, be accurate in that state. In patch 0.50, they changed the dead zone from 25% to 30%. Now, what that basically means is that you are in a fully accurate state as long as you're moving at or under 30% of the max movement speed. And this actually presents a couple problems. Initially, I thought this video was going to be focused on the running accuracy with the Phantom, but after some testing and some research, I found that this dead zone change is, I think, a much bigger issue. One thing that this allows you to do is to strafe back and forth while spraying, and as long as you're strafing in a confined area and keeping, yourself at 30% or less of the max movement speed, you can retain relative accuracy. So just to give you an example, if I was to run across and spray with the Vandal, full sprinting, as you can see, it's not very accurate. But if I was to sit here and AD back and forth like this, I can be extremely accurate, and at the same time, I don't ever have to stop strafing. You can sit here and AD back and forth and spray, and as long as you're at or under the 30% max movement speed, you'll have accuracy like this. Now, the other problem that this accuracy dead zone introduces is actually worse than the AD-AD spraying and worse than the running accuracy of the Phantom, and it's why I've wanted to focus the end of the video on this. But what it is that you're actually better off firing after you begin moving in the opposite direction than firing when you come to a complete stop. As long as you are at 30% or less of the maximum movement speed, you will still be accurate. And what this means is that you can strafe from out of cover and begin firing as you're strafing back to the cover, and you pretty much receive no penalty. You're harder to hit because you're moving, and you're still accurate. Running accuracy should be reserved for weapons like pistols, SMGs, and shotguns, as it's a balance because you're sacrificing range and power for mobility, but it shouldn't work as well with rifles. Now, it can be done with the Vandal, but the Phantom is the biggest issue, and it's way more consistent due to its lower spread and recoil, even with a faster rate of fire. To quote a reply on the Reddit post of Tenz's clip, you could argue that running and spraying still isn't anywhere near as effective as playing the game properly, and you would be absolutely right. But the problem here is that it happens way more than it should. Just hop in a deathmatch and see for yourself how often you can reliably kill someone while running. Now, if you don't believe it, do as he says and go run around a deathmatch with a Phantom, and you'll see that it works more consistently than it probably should. As another example, I don't know if it's just me, but think about how many times you have flashed or been flashed by a teammate, and you swing on the angle and you just get destroyed by a guy full blind, backpedaling, holding mouse 1 with his Phantom at, with his crosshair at whatever angle he was holding. It happens to me a lot. This brings us to walking accuracy, which even after the nerfs it received in patch 0.5 is still pretty damn good. The developers' reply earlier about how walk peeking and angle isn't an effective strategy when someone is holding is definitely true, but here's the issue. People can running wide swing and angle and then immediately slam shift and start spraying and continue moving across the angle, right? And they'll win plenty of fights doing that. Being a practically permanently mobile target while maintaining pretty high accuracy is a big deal in attack FPS. Now, this is probably not as big of an issue at higher elo and higher ranks, just due to the fact that if you were to wide swing an angle, start walking and spraying, the other person is probably likely to kill you before you kill them. But at lower ranks and even the median rank in Valorant, I'm sure it's a huge issue. All right. So closing thoughts. I think that the Phantom specifically needs to be looked at in terms of running accuracy, simply because it just seems to work way too consistently, even if it's only at close to moderate ranges. Secondly, I think that walking accuracy in its current state is probably okay. It's sort of a compromise, and it does have niche usage, but I think the dead zone is currently the biggest problem in my mind and is definitely lowering the skill ceiling for aiming and moving mechanics. So Riot has intentionally lowered the skill floor in Valorant to be more accessible and welcoming to people with no FPS background or no FPS experience. And that's fine, but the game still needs to have a high skill ceiling, especially as an esport. And I think that Valorant does have a high skill ceiling, but the more that we dumb down the aiming and moving mechanics or introducing more RNG, we only seek to lower the skill ceiling of the game, especially when gunplay is obviously a major part of attack FPS. We need a balanced compromise where the game is not too intimidating to newer players and people without FPS experience, but at the same time, you are rewarded for the amount of hours that you put in, and you can really show off your skill. The very last thing I want to talk about is we're going to look at CS, guys, because people love making comparisons between Valorant and Counter-Strike, and they share a lot of similarities, but we need to keep some things in mind. CSGO took a long time to become the game that you currently see now. CSGO has been out for over 8 years, where currently Valorant has been out a little over 5 months. Even though the games are different, I don't think that comparing them is bad, and I think that we can learn from the mistakes that CS has already made, so we don't have to go through the same growing pains in Valorant. I think that it's been great coming from CS to have communicative devs and devs that, you know, want to be transparent with the player base. And truthfully, as players, we can't ask for more than communication, transparency, and they obviously have shown that they're listening to what the players want. So all I can leave you with is continue to give developers feedback, respectfully, of course, on things that you don't like, things that you think should be adjusted, tweaked, removed, whatever your opinion is. Working together is how we're really going to make the game the best it can be, and it just takes time, guys. So don't lose faith. Keep letting them know what you think and how you feel, and let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you think that the running accuracy is overpowered, or maybe the walking accuracy? What do you think about the dead zone that I've shown you and what you can do with spraying and peeking corners? And what do you think the direction Riot should take the game is? So thank you guys for watching. Have a good one. Peace.